All right, chapter two, this is percents. So basically, a percent is a fraction. So for example, let's say you have five, oh, let's say you have, for example, five boys and you have six girls, for example, right? And the question is, what percent of all students are boys? So what you would do is you would say boys are 5 over the total number of students, which is 11, right? So 5 over 11 is going to be uh, 0 is going to be 0.454, right? Which in a percent is written as 45.4, right? So you would say 45.4% of students are boys. That's how percents work, basically. Now, for example, let's say you have Jacob, who got 50% of the questions on a 30 question test correct and 90% on a 50 question test correct. What percent of all questions did he get correct? Now in total I have 30 questions in the first one and 50 in the second one, which means in total I have 80 questions, right? Now I need to find the number of those questions that were correct. It says 50% were correct. So 50% from 30, you can write that as 50% times 30, because of means multiply. Of means multiply. So that's 50% of 30. And then we also have 90% of 50. So 90% of multiply 50. So 50% you can write that as 0.5 times 30. And then 90% you can write that as 0.9 times 50. And because we're finding the total, we add them together. If you solve for this, you're going to get 0.5 times 30 plus 0.9 times 50 is going to be 60. So in total, we have 60 questions that are correct from 80. So to find the fraction, it'll be 60 over 80. And then if you find the percent of that, it's going to be 0.75, which can be written as 75%. So 75% of questions were correct. That's example 1. Example 3, it says the price of a dress is increased by 20%. Anytime it says increase or decrease, you would do it like this. So for example, if it says increase, you will add 100% to that value, right? So for example, if I say 20% increase, that means 20% plus 100%, which is 120%. And then you can write this as 1.2, because 120% means 120 over 100, which can be written as 1.2, right? So that will be 1.2. So that's 20% increase. If I say, for example, 35% increase, so same thing, it'll be 35 plus 100, which is 135, which can be written as 1.35. If I say I want a 200% increase, that'll be 100% plus 200%, which is 300%, which can be written as 3, because 300 divided by 100 is 3, right? So if I say, for example, a 10% decrease, all you do in this case is you just minus from 100. So 100 minus 10, right? That's going to be 90, so 90% can be written as 0.9. So 10% decrease is written as 0.9. If I say, for example, I have a 80% decrease, that'll be 100 minus 80, which is 20%, which can be written as 0.2, right? That's how you solve it. Now, in this question, we have that it's increased by 20%, which means you write this as 100 plus 20, which is 120%, which can be written as 1.2, right? So, and then it says it's decreased by 40%. Decrease means 100 minus 40, which means 60. 60% can be written as 0.6. And then it says increased by 25%, which means 25% plus 100. So it'll be 125%, which means you can write that as 1.25. This is 1.25. 1.25. It says the final price is what percent of the original price. So the original price was, let's say, for example, it's X. So then I increase this value by 20%. So I write times 1.2. and then I decrease it by 60%, by 40%, which means times 0.6, and then I increase it again by 25%. So this is what I get, right? And this will be equals to the new cost. Let's say it's P. So if you multiply these values, you get 1.2 times 0.6 times 1.25 is going to be 0.9. So you get x multiplied by 0.9 is equals to P, which means it's actually 0.9x is equals to P. And 0.9 means 90%. So the new price is 90% of the original, right? The new price is 90% of the original price. That's how you solve it. Okay, next. We have simple and compound interest. Simple interest means, for example, you take $100 and you put it in the bank. You invest it in the bank. Now, what's going to happen over time is that that value is going to increase. So it starts off by, let's say, 100, right? You start off by 100, and then it's going to increase by some value every year, right? But a fixed value. So it'll be, let's say, 105 in 1 year, and then 110, 120, 130, and so on. It'll be a straight linear graph. So that's simple interest, and that's the formula. So in this, A is the amount. A depicts the amount. P is the principal amount. That's what you're investing in the bank. R is the rate, right? So what percent you're getting, and then T is the time, how long it takes. So that's for simple. In compound interest, what's happening is that it is increasing exponentially. So let's say you invest 100 as your principal, it's going to then increase by a rate, right? And that rate is going to increase your total amount by a greater value every single time. So it's going to be an exponential curve. So everything else is the same. The only difference is that T is in the power, right? So it's to the power of T. That's compound interest. And then you have another formula for compound interest where you have N. N tells you basically how many times, it's the number of times it is compounded. It's compounded per year, right? It's the number of times compounded per year. So for example, let's say I have $1,000. I invest $1,000. The rate, let's say, is 5%, and it doesn't compound annually. It compounds, let's say, semi-annually, right? It compounds semi-annually. So semi-annually means like per year. Semi means like half a year. So semi-annually means like every half a year, which means every 6 months. So semi-annually means every 6 months, which means, what is N? N is the number of times it's compounded per year. So if it's compounded every 6 months, that means 6 months for the first part of the year, and then 6 months again, which means it's compounded once in the first half and then another time in the second half, which means in a total year, it's going to be compounded twice. So 2 times in a year, which means N is 2, right? Because it's 2 times per year. It's compounded twice per year. So if you plug this in the formula, you get A, which is the total amount that you will have, is 1,000 multiplied by 1 plus R. R is 5%. So 5%, you can write that as 0.05 divided by N. So N is 2 times 2, and then NT. So N is 2 again. And then let's say, for example, we leave it in the bank for 10 years. Let's say time is 10 years. So multiply this by 10. Right? So that's what you'll end up with. And then you can put this in your calculator and then you will get your answer. Easy. Okay, here's an example. It says Jonas has a savings account that earns 3% interest compounded annually, right? So compounded annually means it's compounded every year, which means N is 1, which means you can use the simple formula. You can use this one, right? You don't have to use this one because N is 1. It'll just cancel out. It says her initial deposit was $1,000, which means that's the principal amount, that's P. And they want to know the value in 10 years, right? So that's T. T is 10. So the formula is A is equals to P, 1 plus R, and T. we have the principal, which is 1,000. We have the rate, which is 3%. 3%, you can write that as 0.03, and then the time is 10 years. You can add this together, you get 1,000, and then 1 plus 0.03 is 1.03 to the power of 10. That's what you will get, and that will be your answer. All right, next. It says J puts an initial deposit of $400 into a bank, so that's P. It earns 5%, so 5% you can write that as 0.05, that's R. Each year compounded semi-annually, so it's not every year, it's semi-annually, which means every half a year, which means every 6 months, or it means 2 times per year, right? So we need the total amount in dollars. So the formula is A is equals to P 1 plus R and then NT, and this is divided by N. So in this case we have 400 as P. 1 plus R is 5%, so 0.05 divided by N, which is 2, and NT, so 2 times T. We don't know the number of years, it just says T years. So that's what we will get, and then if you solve this, you get 400. 1 plus 0.05 divided by 2 is 0.025, 2T, and then you can simplify this, you get 400 1.025 2T. That will be the total amount, right? Okay, next. So an investor decides to offer a business owner a $20,000 loan at a simple interest of 5%. So because it says simple interest, we'll use the formula for simple interest, which is P1 plus RT, right? So that's the formula. The principal is 20,000, so P is 20,000. And then we have 1 plus R is 5%, so it's 0.05, and then it says T years, so times T. So that will be your answer. We cannot add this because you cannot add 1 to 0.05 T. So it'll be D. Right, next. We have the concept of percent change. So anytime the value of something changes over time, you can find the percent change. So for example, something can decrease in value, other things can increase in value, right? So the way you find the percent change is the new value minus the old value divided by the old value times 100. That will give you the percent change. So for example, let's say we have that the number of TVs sold was 685 on the week of Black Friday. The number of TVs sold the following week was 500. So it says what percent less. Basically we need to find the percent decrease. So to find the percent increase or decrease, the formula is new value minus the old value divided by the old value. So the new value is 500 because that's in the following week, and the old value was 685 divided by the old value 685, and then times 100 to find the percent. So if you solve for this, you get 500 minus 685 divided by 685 times 100. It'll be minus 27%, right? So that tells you that it's decreasing by 27%. So that's a 27% decrease. All right, questions? So first one, it says X is 50% larger than Z. So you can write this as X is equals to 50% larger means 50% increase, which means you can write that as 100 plus 50, which is 150%, which is 1.5. So X is 1.5 Z, right? Larger than Z. That's the first one. The second one is Y is 20% larger than Z. You can write that as 1.2 Z. It says what X is what percent larger than Y. So now we're looking at just X and Y, which means we need to remove Z somehow. We need to eliminate Z. To do that, we could, for example, divide both of them. In that case, the Z would cancel. So we can say, for example, we can divide this. So let's first find z. Z is equals to, or no, how about this? X is equals to 1.5z divided by y and 1.2z. If you divide this, you can cancel the z's, right? So that gives you x over y is equals to 1.5, 1.2. So you can bring the y up to 1.5. You get x is equals to 1.5 divided by 1.2 y. And then you can write this as 1.5 divided by 1.2 is 1.25. So you can say x equals 1.25y, which another way to write this would be a 25% increase. So you can say x is 25% larger, or has been increased by 25% of y, larger than y, right? So that will be your answer. Okay, next it says Veronica earns n% interest compounded annually if she opened the account with $200. The expression this represents the amount, right? They want us to find x in terms of m. So the formula for compound interest is p1 plus r to the power of t. The amount is 200. The rate is m%, so you can write that as 1 plus m over 100, because it's m%, m over 100, and then to the power of t. So this is what we have. Now if you look at what the expression that they've given us, we have 200 here, we have t over here, and we have x. X actually is equals to this. X is equals to 1 plus m over 100. And another way to write this is x is equals to 1 plus 0.01 m, because over 100 means 0.01. And that's what we have over here. Next one, it says we have a survey of 400 seniors. X% said that they plan on majoring in physics. One university has used this data to estimate the number of physics majors it expects for its entering class of 3,300 students. If the university expects 66 physics majors, what's the value of x? So we need to find x, and we have 3,300 students. X is the ones who are planning on majoring in physics. It is 66 are taking physics, so that's 66 over 3,300. So total is 3,300, and then from that pool, 66 are taking physics. So if you solve for this, you get 0.02, which can be written as 2%. So 2% will take physics. That will be your answer. Okay, next. So the table below shows the number of box spring and mattresses units sold over 4 weeks at a bedding store. Which week accounted for approximately 32% of all box spring units sold? So we need 32% of all box springs. So total box springs is 167, that's the total. We need to find which one is 32% of that, which week. So what you can do is you can say 32%, you can find 32% of 167. So you can write that as 0.32 times 167, which is going to give you 53, around 53. I get 53.4, so it'll be around 53. So week 3 is 53. That'll be week 3. Okay, next. Approximately what percent of all units sold came from week 2? So we need all units sold from week 2. So in total we have in total we have 386 mattresses, and they're saying what percent came from week 2. In week 2 we had 103, so that'll be 103 over 386. 103 over 386 is going to be 0.266, which is close to 26.7%, which is B. Question 6. Mattresses accounted for approximately what percent of all units sold during week 1? So mattresses and all units sold in week 1. So we're looking at mattresses in week 1. So in week 1 the total was 85. We're looking at week 1, and then mattresses accounts for how much of that? Mattresses were 47 in week 1, right? So that's 47 from 85. 47 out of 85. That's going to be 0.55, which is around 55%. That will be our answer. Okay, next. So what was the approximate percent decrease in the number of mattresses sold from week 3 to week 4? So number of mattresses, week 3 to week 4, percent decrease. So week 4 mattresses. So in week 3 it was 68, in week 4 it's 43. We need to find the percent decrease. To find the percent decrease, the formula is new minus old divided by old. So the new value is 43. The old value is 68 divided by 68. So it's going to give you 43 minus 68 over 68, which is negative 0.367, which is around 36.7% decrease. So the negative sign means decrease. So 36.7. So close to 37. Okay, next. The discount price of a book is 20% less than the retail price. So you can write this as the discount is 20% less, means you can write that as 100 minus 20, which means 80%, which means you can write that as 0.8. So D is equals to 0.8, this is 0.8, then the retail price. Let's say the retail is R. So that's the first equation. Then it says James manages to purchase the book at 30% off the discount price. So he bought the book. So let's say the purchase price is 30% off, means 30% decrease. So 30% decrease means 100 minus 30, which is 70, which means you can write that as 0.7. So 0.7 of the discount price. So 0.7 D, right? So what percent of the retail price did James pay? So we have these two equations. So we know that D is equals to this. You can simply substitute that into D over here, which means you get P is equals to 0.7 D, which is equals to this, 0.8 R. If you solve this, you get P is equals to 0.56 R, which means the purchase price is 56% of the retail price. So that will be 56% of retail. Okay, next. Each day Robert eats 40% of pistachios left in his jar. At the end of the second day, 27 pistachios remain. How many pistachios were in the jar at the start of the first day? So you can say, for example, on day 1, he eats 40% of the pistachios left, which means if he eats 40%, that means 60% are left. right? 60% of the original. And then on day 2, it's going to be 60% of what was left on the previous day. That's going to be left. So 60% of day 1, which is this. And then on day 3, it's going to be the same thing, right? So 0.6 of day 2. So you just multiply this. So it says at the end of the second day, 27 pistachios remain. So on day 2, we have 27 that are left. So this will be equals to 27. So if you solve this, you will get 0.6 times 0.6 is 0.36. 0.36x is equals to 27. And then to find x, 27 divided by 0.36, you get 75. So he actually had 75 on the first day. And then he would eat 40% of what was left. Okay, next. So Joanne bought a doll at 10% discount of the original price of 105.82. She had to pay a sales tax of X% on the discounted price. If the total amount she paid was 100, what was the value of X? So when you purchase something, you always pay for the price that you pay plus the tax, right? So that's the total amount that you have to pay. Now in this case, she bought it at 10%, at a 10% discount. 10% discount means it's a 10% decrease, right? 10% decrease means you can write it as 100 minus 10, which is 90%. 90% means 0.9. So let's say it's 90% of the original price. So the price that she pays is 90% of 105.82. This is how much she pays for the dough. And then on top of that, she has to pay a tax of X%. So she pays X% of the price that she paid, which is this. So she paid X% on top of what she originally paid. So times 0.9, 105.82. And the total amount that she paid was 100. So that's equals to 100. So now we'll have to solve for this. 0.9 times 105.82 is around 95.2 plus X% means you can write it as X over 100, and then this is the same thing. So 95.2. Now we'll need to solve this, so you can take 95.2 on the other side. So 100 minus your answer, 95.2, which is 4.762 equals to X over 100 times 95.2. You can then cross multiply to find X. So 100 goes up to 4.762. So that's going to be 476.2 is equals to X times 95.2. And then this 95.2 can come down and divide. So divided by 95.2, which is going to be 5. So this is equals to 5, which means she pays 5% in sales tax. That will be 5. Okay, next. In 2010, the number of houses built in Town A was 25% greater than the houses built in Town B. So you can say Town A is 25% greater than Town B. That will be your equation. And then it says if 70 houses were built in Town A, how many were built in Town B? So 70 were built in Town A. How many were built in Town B? So you simply divide 70 by 1.25. So 70 over 1.25 is going to be 56. So in Town B, we had 56 houses that were built. Right, next. Over a 2-week span, John ate 20 pounds of chicken wings and 15 pounds of hot dogs. Kyle ate 20% more chicken wings and 40% more hot dogs. So considering only chicken wings and hot dogs, Kyle ate approximately X% more food by weight than John. What is X? So we have John and we have Kyle. It says John ate 20 pounds of chicken wings, that's chicken, and that is hot dogs. And 15 pounds of hot dogs. It says Kyle ate 20% more chicken wings. So 20% more of 20. So to write that, it's 1.2, which is 20% more of 20. So that's going to be 24. So that means Kyle ate 24 pounds of chicken wings. And it says 40% more in hot dogs. So 40% more means 1.4 times 15. 1.4 times 15 is 21. So Kyle ate 21 pounds of hot dogs. So in total, John ate 35 pounds and Kyle ate 45 pounds. So we want to find the percent increase. It is X% more, which means percent increase. To find percent increase, it is new minus old divided by old. So the new value is 45, the old value is 35, and then the old value is 35. So we get 45 minus 35 divided by 35, which is 28, 0.285, which means around 28.5% more. So closer to 29, and that'll be our answer.